Hello, hello, mic testing. Let me open chat here. Everyone, how's everyone doing today? Alrighty, I'm late. I know, my bad. I was setting things up. Alrighty, my bad, my bad, my bad. Android course is happening. We have bought the course. And if you guys want a little bit of a tease, do you guys want a little bit of a tease? We are acquiring another course. So we have acquired Harnoor's course. I've paid him. And there is another one. Can you guess which niche this one is in? Not Web3. Web3 तो मैं ही सिखाऊंगा ना. Yes, few people guessed it, but I'm gonna leave it as a tease. So by New Year's, you should have 2 more offline courses added. Android course and yeah, you guys are pretty close. The hot technology today. उसका भी एक course जुड़ जाएगा. I've gone through the content. It's pretty good. It's more beginner friendly. Not generative AI, but something. So we'll announce soon. And all of this will be offline, but both Harnoor and this other guy have agreed to take a few live sessions. I think it makes a lot of sense for Harnoor to take live sessions on what do you call it? GSOC. And I think it takes a lot of sense for this guy to take a few live sessions on just high level how to go through his course. His course is more beginner friendly, so we'll see though. That's all the high level things I wanted to cover. It's 7:03, so we're already pretty late here. Let me set things up. The only thing I would say is if you are, happy about these announcements, okay, we are adding more courses. Don't get distracted. It's very easy to, do 10 different things. Don't focus on doing 10 different things. Focus on just, one thing at a time. And you have all of these courses for a long time. 3 years is the expiry. So you have my course, you'll have a Noor's course and the third course, and maybe a fourth one as well. I'm meeting someone tomorrow for another one. So this is a whole package you have for 3 years. Pick and choose wisely. Don't, run from one to another and don't do anything half-heartedly. If right now your focus is this, then focus here. If your focus is something else, feel free to pick and choose. That's the only high-level advice I wanted to give. The link to the slides for today is, let's see. There we go. Stop sharing. Copy. There we go. All right. All righty. This is the link to the slides for today. This on this side. Sorry, guys. It'll take me 1 second to set things up here. New setup, new machine. So, right. This looks much better. Let me share the right screen here. Oh, the hell. Right captions. Okay. Share screen. The right one. All right. Start recording. All right. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 3.1. We're taking things slow, but I did just a comparison from the last cohort and this cohort. And we're actually basically running on schedule. In the last cohort as well, in the third week, we covered these topics. So we're doing the same here, only we have a lot of offline videos to cover this time as well, because, more content always helps, especially if you're a beginner. I'm seeing much more retention than the first cohort. I'm seeing a lot more people come to live classes, which is great. And I'll try to teach more visually here and in the classes to come. And I would urge everyone to be very, just give a lot of time during live classes. That's 4 hours. And after live classes in the offline videos as well and on the assignments. One thing that I wanted to talk about was, the classes are going slightly longer, 3 hours-ish, but you just have to stick for 2 hours. I'll try to cover content in 2 hours, and then the extra half an hour, I'm just taking notes. So feel free to skip that section. Okay? Today, we're covering middlewares authentication, global caches, and Zod. This is a decent chunk of basically hard backend stuff to understand. So we'll try to cover as much as we can in today's live video. Tomorrow, we're going to introduce databases, specifically MongoDB. We'll introduce tomorrow. And then I think eventually we will introduce SQL as well. That's the high level of this week. Let's get right into it. Let's begin with an example. A few of you might have seen the offline video where I said, "Ke bhaiya, hospitals." By the way, sorry, one question. Can you guys see the screen well, or is it still, I'm very big? Or is it okay? What does yes mean? Okay, cool. So I was saying, if you remember the hospital example from last week, I basically said, "Ke bhaiya, in a real world hospital is almost like a JavaScript project where there is a doctor's cabin and a few doctors are sitting here, or maybe just one doctor is sitting here. And this guy is heavily single threaded. He will only attend one person at a time. Does not matter how many people want to get into the cabin. They will all have to wait in the waiting area. And only when the doctor is like, okay, I am free, will the next person come in. So you can say technically the doctor is single threaded. The doctor does some tasks, specifically doing consultations, telling people what their health situation is. And he can only handle one patient at a time. This was the example we covered last week. We did not have this section. Now I've introduced this section. Okay, yaar, during COVID, you did not go to the doctor's cabin directly, or even otherwise sometimes. A lot of times, you come to the waiting area. Then you go through an insurance check. It does not happen in India, happens in the US. India may, they will ask you for insurance. They might ask you for your Aadhaar number. You go through some registration first. Then, if your insurance information is correct, or they know that you can pay them, is when they say, first go get a blood test. You go to the lab, get a blood test, get back your results. Then if they say, okay, if the blood test is fine, then go to the BP check maybe. And if this is fine, then you go to the doctor's cabin. You can't directly enter here. Doctor, what will the doctor do with no reports of yours? So there are a few pre-checks that happen before you actually enter the doctor's cabin. Your Aadhaar, before you reach the doctor, your Aadhaar insurance information is taken. Only if you have the insurance, you proceed. Blood test is done only if no STDs are present. Debatable, but you get the idea. If something bad is happening here, your blood is black in color, so they'll be like, oh, you're an alien. Go out from here. You're not allowed to meet the doctor. BP is checked. Only BP is reasonable. Well, you guys get the idea. Of course, even if it's unreasonable, you will meet the doctor. But assume that, a few pre-checks are happening. And people are like, okay, this pre-check failed, get out. You're not allowed to meet the doctor for some reason. Okay? Before you reach the doctor, all these things that you saw, which is all the three pre-checks and the doctor's cabin, are all the JavaScript thread. I am not saying that you have, parallel processes running here. I know in the real world, it will be parallel. Doctor's cabin will separately work and, multiple people can go here. But in the context of JavaScript, in the context of what we are learning today, which is middlewares, think of all of this as a single JavaScript thread. Think that there is a single lab attendant or a single doctor who is doing all of these things. He goes here, changes the hat and asks you for an insurance check, goes here, does your blood test, go here, does a BP check, kicks you out if something bad has happened, nothing bad has happened, lets you in the cabin and helps you out. So all of this is being done by one person. That one person can only handle one patient at a time. So one patient goes here, 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 and then goes out, and then other patient goes here, 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 so on and so forth. Alrighty, let's proceed. What is the equivalent code of this? Again, this is very heavily hoped on that you have already gone through last week's videos. Okay? Const express equal to require express, const app equal to express, initializing an app variable, and then exposing a single route for now. Okay, bhaiya, app.get /health checkup. Anytime a request comes here, we simply return back rest.send, your heart is healthy. We are doing no logic here. Ideally, you should do some logic here. The user will give you some input. You will do some validation on top. You will check, figure out some output. You will return that output to the user. But we're not doing any of that. Simple function to simulate. This is what's happening in the doctor's cabin. The question is, how do you do these pre-checks? Should they also happen here inside the app.get handler? Or should you introduce something else? More specifically, middlewares. I'll ask you a few questions at this point. How do you do auth checks? Okay, haan bhaiya, has this person Does this person have the funds to meet the doctor? Can this person actually, does he have insurance? Things like these. Ensure that the input is valid. Okay, are there blood tests succeeding? Are there, is there BP fine, so on and so forth. Basically, generally in the real world, the use case of middleware, the thing I'm talking about again and again, is usually to do pre-checks. And in the real world, pre-checks are of two types. Either authentication, making sure this person is actually logged in into the LinkedIn website. If you hit a LinkedIn backend server, the first check that usually happens is this person logged in? What is this person's username? That. And then something called input validation. कि हाँ भैया, they are trying to access this logic, but have they sent us the right inputs? Maybe they have not. So these two pre-checks usually happen before your actual logic kicks in. What is actual logic? This logic right here. Question is, what is the best way to do these pre-checks? Is it right here above your logic? Or is there some other place where you can define a few things where these pre-checks should happen? Let's see that. Again, what are the two pre-checks that any real website does? Number one, authentication. Number two, input validation, making sure that your inputs, the route that you're trying to hit, whatever inputs it expects, you are giving it the right inputs. Answer. Middlewares. So middleware, this is the job of middlewares. The whole reason we took this example was to show, okay, this should ideally be a middleware. What that is, we will see very soon. But technically, what should it be? It should be a middleware. Cool. Before we proceed, let's add some constraints to our route. So forget the hospital for now. Let's move on to a real world problem. The problem is there is a health checkup endpoint. And here, two things need to happen before you can, actually run the logic, which right now is nothing. The logic is simply rest.send, your your heart is healthy. But before the control reaches here, two checks need to happen. Number one, user needs to send a kidney ID as a query parameter, which should be a number from 1 to 2, or basically either 1 or 2. People have two kidneys. So user, whenever they're hitting the health checkup endpoint, they should give a query parameter called kidney ID, which should either be 1 or 2. Kirat, what is a query parameter? We discussed last week, but whenever you're sending a GET request a lot of times, you can send an input along, for example, localhost colon 3000 question mark n equal to 3000. This n is what's called a query parameter. User should send a username and password in the headers. We have ignored headers until now, but there are a few ways to send inputs to a request. One of them is this query parameter. One of them is body, if you remember from Postman, if you've seen those videos. And the third one is these headers. Hello. हाँ भाई. Oh, it's participant से join करो ना. As a participant join करो, link नहीं है क्या? Oh, okay, 1 second. तो तुम्हें क्या चाहिए? Okay, OTP. हाँ, भेज दो. Quick pause here. Let's take a breather. Rookie has been facing some issues, so I'll just help him out with an OTP so he can log in. I feel a few people cannot get in. So to allow them to get in, we will have to wait for a few seconds. We will have to give him an OTP. Where does the OTP come? On this phone? No, it comes on a different phone. So I'll be back in 1 second. Need to grab an OTP really quickly. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. Sorry for the minor inconvenience. 068546 068546. Let me write this down. I'm going to forget this really bad. Hello. 068546. Try करना जरा. 068 546. 546. Yep. All right. Thanks. Sorry about that, guys. Let's proceed. I was saying, okay, you need to do these two things before you can actually let this logic kick in. Question is, where do you do these? Answer is middleware, but let's get into the code base and actually see how this happens. Okay? This is the ugly way to do it. Too much code I've written, so take a breather and try to read it. Easily, slowly, let's try to code it as well. What do? I say express route simple stuff. I get the kidney ID as a query parameter. I get the username from the header. I get the password from the header. And then I first do the first check, which is if username is not equal to Harkirat and password is not equal to pass, assume your website only has one user. LinkedIn has a million users. Your website, your backend only has a single user, and his username is this, password is this. If this person sends a request, you let it through. If someone else sends a request, you block it, which is why, what is the check here? Ki haan bhai, whoever is sending the request, please send username and password in the inputs. This is similar to, if we go back a few slides, the check that is happening here. Okay, they'll ask you for your Aadhaar card, right? They'll ask you for your PAN ID, your insurance information, and only if it is right, will they let you proceed. Similarly, what am I doing here? Okay, bhaiya, username should be this, password should be this. If the user is sending these two things, means it's a legitimate user. If not, then the control will reach here. Look at this condition. What does it say? If user is not equal to Harkirat, this should ideally be an OR condition. Or password is not equal to this. Yeah, this shouldn't be an AND. This should be a OR. Okay, both of these things should be right. Their username should be Harkirat and their password should be pass. Then the control should flow through. Else, control should go here and it should return early. This is what's called early returning. I could totally do the opposite. If condition ke andar I put my right logic, but a cleaner way to do it is that you stop early. This is called early returning, which is that haan bhai, do all your if checks first and return early. And if none of the returns happened, it means everything is fine and the control reaches here. Let's try to code this. Where did it go? Let's try to code this together on Replit and go from there. The ugly version, which is no middlewares, standard stuff that we have done until now. Okay? Going to keep the code here on the left. Let's keep it here. Let's go to Replit and try to code this logic ourselves. So I would urge you guys to do it as well. The more you write code, the more you will learn. If this seems too simple, then feel free to skip. Going to open them side by side. Going to increase the font size. Going to type very quickly. You guys can follow along and code. I will take a breather after I complete coding. Okay, const express equal to require express importing the library. Const app equal to express app dot get slash health dash checkup. The callback function that should get called. Const. Let's just focus on user. Let's just focus on authentication. Forget the other input validation that I was talking about. Just authentication. Let's focus on. Username is rec.headers.username. Password is rec.headers.password. If let's do a cleaner logic. Let's not do the early return thing I was talking about. There you go. If username is equal to whatever, Harkirat, password is equal to pass, then we are good. You can do the standard logic. Do something with kidney here. Rest.json. Message your kidney is fine. All right. Just this much. Is it clear? I hope this is very simple stuff. If you have done Express until now, if you have skipped things, classes, then this might not be. But is this code base clear? Okay, we just have added another authentication check. I will show how this actually runs. We will post on Postman. But looking at the code, looks beautiful to me as well. All right, let's proceed. The other thing I said was input validation. कि हाँ, this specific route expects a kidney ID as well. So const kidney ID equal to rec dot query dot kidney ID. कि हाँ भाई, user whoever is the sending this input send this kidney ID, and we need to do another validation check कि हाँ kidney ID is either equal to 1. Sorry guys, new keyboard. There you go. Or kidney ID equal to 2. Only this case should this logic run. And you can add a bunch of else's here. Else add input and then add another else here if you want. Let's not do that. Let's not complicate things. Let's just keep it very simple. And at the end, let's add a res dot status 400.json. Something's up with your inputs. Okay, this is one way of doing it. This is actually a cleaner way of doing it, the way I've done it on the right, which is do the if check in the opposite way. Basically do something like this. Ignore all of this. Do this. If not username equal to this and password equal to this, then return. Else continue. If not of this, which is actually, if you remove this not and actually convert it, this and this are the same thing. Username is not equal to Akirat, or password is not equal to pass. This condition and this condition is the same. Whenever you remove a negate, you make these not equal to, and you make this or. Why does this happen? Technically think of it. What is the first condition? If username is Harkirat, username sahi hai. Password is password. Password bhi sahi hai. Both the conditions are right. Not of this is, opposite of this is, username is not Harkirat or password is not pass. Either one of these conditions is met. It means the user input is wrong. And so we will stop the flow right here, which is why this condition or the condition that you saw here is one way to early return. And similar check you can do here. This is also fine. If kidney is 1 or 2, then do this. Or you can say, if kidney is not equal to 1 and kidney is not equal to 2, which means it's 3, 4, 5, whatever. It is the wrong input. It should have been 1 or 2. How many kidneys do we have? 2. That is the input that is expected. If you send the wrong input, we early return. And then finally, if everything is fine, we return correctly. This is the ugly way of doing input validations and authentication. Let's try to run it and see if it works as expected. I click on play here. You should as well, if you were following along. And this is a breather after this. So if you've not yet coded, feel free to code. I am also happy to paste a gist of this, so you guys can just copy paste from there. Oh, what am I missing? I hope you guys figured it out. It's a app.listen at the end to actually listen on a specific port. Else this Express server, won't actually run and listen for requests. Now that I gave it an app.listen 3000, you see a browser opened up here and I can send it requests. Let me open it in a new tab. It gives me a nice URL. Let me send a GET request to this URL with username, password, and kidney ID. So I'm going to take my URL. You should take yours. Or if you want to do mine, you can hit mine as well because it's deployed on the internet now. Let's go here. And what is the route? Health/checkup. Open them side by side a little bit. /health-checkup. And I'm going to give a kidney ID as a query parameter. So remove this, make this a get, and give this as a question mark kidney ID equal to 1. All right. This input is correct. 1 or 2 is correct. And in headers, I will send the right username and password. password pass. If I send this request, which is to my HTTP server /health dash checkup question mark kidney ID equal to 1 with username Harkirat and password pass, it says something is up with your inputs. What am I missing? Can you check? Can you tell me, Harkirat? Pass. I already, oh no, I don't know it. What's up? Can anyone tell me? Something obvious only I'm missing. Okay, so many answers. Some people say brackets are incorrect. Brackets look okay. Some people say and. Oh, spelling. Is it spelling? Harkirat, Harkirat. Password, username. Password query. Oh, kidney ID. Kidney ID. There we go. Let's stop it. Let's restart it. Kidney ID. Kidney ID. All right. Let's send that request. And it says your kidney is fine. What is the status code? Let's zoom this up a bit. Status code is 200. So our thing worked as expected. If I send in the wrong inputs, kidney ID as 3, it says something is up with your inputs, which means control did reach here correctly, and vice versa. If I send the wrong headers, if you log into Facebook with your wrong input and like username and password, it will tell you something is up, right? So similarly, if I give it the wrong input, even if I give it the right kidney ID, it will still say something is up with your inputs. Cool. Dumb way of doing input validation and authentication. So what's the right way of doing it? Let's get into that. Unsure if I pasted this, just so let me paste this just right here. Open chat. You guys can just copy the gist and try it out locally on your REPL. Although I feel like so many people will try this, it will break. So try it locally. I'm assuming you will now understand how to run Express things locally as well. Cool. Let's proceed. The dumb way of doing this, whatever checks you want to do here, do here. Finally, do your logic. What if I tell you to introduce another route that does kidney replacement? Inputs need to be the same. I tell you, this one is for kidney checkup. Introduce another route that is for kidney replacement. So it will be a post route that will also expect some kidney ID as an input. And you have to do both of these checks there as well. What will you do? You will write this code. Okay, first get call. I will do all the validation checks. And then same I've written here. Exact same code in two places. What principle does this violate? It violates the dry principle. Do not repeat yourself. If I have to introduce 20 different routes, which need to have authentication as well, which need to have kidney ID validation as well, writing this logic again and again for every route is bad. If you have to make a change, you have to make that change in one place, two places, 10 places, the number of routes that you have. So what if I tell you to say ugly solution, create a new route, repeat the code. I'm going to rewrite this code here, rewrite this code here, and keep on going. What is the way to fix? Whenever you have try, whenever you have do not repeat yourself, you create a function. You will be like, Kirat, I will not write these like this. I will create functions at the top. I will just do function call here, function call here. That fixes my try. I am no longer repeating everything that all the logic that I had to write. I will rewrite at the top. So something like this. Function 1 at the top, which is the username validator. Function 2 at the top, which is a kidney validator. And my app.get will now be like, if not username validator, return this. If not kidney validator, return this. Else return this. So my validation checks are slightly linear now. I only have to add whatever 7 lines of code rather than adding whatever 20 lines of code in every route. And whenever there is a change that needs to happen in the kidney validator, let's say humans begin to have 3 kidneys, then I'll just add another check here and kidney ID equal to 3. I don't have to write that change here, and all the other routes. I have to make that change in one place. Arkira, problem fixed. I will say yes. But as you can see, there is still a lot of code repetition. This code this code is still in two places. You can optimize it further. You can be like, Akirat, I will move this rest call here. Yes, you can do 100 things to bring it as close to optimum. But the real optimum in Express and generally in other languages for this use case is to use middlewares. When you know you have to do a bunch of pre-checks, you move them some other place, and that some other place is called a middleware. Now let's see what's the ideal solution to this problem. And it is a middleware. Breathe in, breathe out. Slightly jarring concept, but with all the pre-checks that we have done, hopefully this becomes simpler. Look at a route now. Let's say I have 3 routes, and all the first 2 routes at least need to do both username validation and kidney validation. First, ignore this part. Just focus on this. Isn't this clean? कि हाँ भाई app.get/health checkup. Userware middleware, some function that will do the user authentication checks. Kidney middleware, some function that will do the kidney checks. And then finally, my handler, which will actually handle my logic. Isn't this 100 times cleaner than this? कि हाँ, do a first check here, second check here, and then do my logic. The fact that this route can only worry about its application logic and defer all the authentication checks to someone else somehow. How is this happening? We will see. But isn't this cleaner? Yes, sir. It is 100 times cleaner. It's just my logic and all the validations that need to check. I have passed in upfront here as callback functions. This is how you use middlewares in Express. And as you can see, if I have 3 routes, first is a health checkup route that needs to do a kidney checkup and user validation. I give both of these middlewares. Second is a kidney check route, which needs to do user validation and kidney middleware. I need both of them. The third one is a heart check, which does not need the kidney validation. Kidney is not expected as an input. Heart ID is whatever. But username validation it needs to do. So here you can just pass in the user validator. So that is how you can pick and choose and pass various middlewares. Question is, how do you define a middleware? How does that middleware do an early return? Or if the validations are right, how does that middleware send control to the next middleware? So before we proceed, let me share some high level information with you. Okay. I've lied a little bit to you until now. I said this is the syntax to create an HTTP route. Give me the route, give me a callback function. I have lied a little bit here. You don't necessarily have to give just one callback function. You can actually give a range of callback functions here. You can be like, okay, callback function 1, callback function 2, callback function 3. Or if you want, you can write function here. The first function does something and then second function, so on and so forth. But Harkirat, what is the point of giving so many functions? Where does the control reach when the first endpoint gets hit, when the user sends a request here? Let me show you. Let me add 2 functions here. First one and second one. First one will also take rec and res as an input. Second one also takes rec and res as an input. Console.log hi from rec1, rec2. And let's say the first one, no one responds back. No one does. I can do a rest.json here, but let's say I don't do that. I'm just simply logging. How does control reach here or here? If there are 10 functions here that I give one after the other, where does the control reach? Let me run this. What is this? This is a get to /health checkup. So let me, since it is a get, I can actually just directly go to my browser and call it. I don't have to go to Postman. If I log, you can see the request is hung. Why is it hung? Because never did I do a rest.send either here or here. What gets logged? Hi from rec1. What does it tell you? Okay, the control reaches here. The first time a request comes, whatever is the function right next to the route, the control will reach here. Question is, Harkirat, then why did you even define the second one? What is the purpose of this one? Great question. I've lied about another thing. There are 3 inputs to all these callback functions. There is rec, there is res, and there is next. This next is a function in itself, which you can call if you think things are fine. In the end, these chain of functions are the pre-checks before the final function is called. This is your final function. This is a pre-check. Okay, bhaiya, I will do some pre-check here. If things go fine, I will call next, which would route the request to the next one. But Kirat, how is this happening under the hood? How is calling next making sure the control is reaching here? That is Express doing its thing. This is how Express lets you chain through middlewares. Okay, they say, do all your pre-checks here. If you think things are fine, call the third argument that you have, and I will make sure control reaches the next guy. Same thing for the next guy. The next guy can also, have a next function. And then that calling this next function will make sure control reaches here, so on and so forth. Finally, the last one is where you don't really need the next function. You actually do in a few cases, but most of the times, the last one is where you will not, you can, like next will still be defined here, but you don't need it. You will just need this res object to actually do a, res.send whatever. Cool. This is this is the actual syntax of a route handler, which is there can be multiple functions here, not just one. Let's go back to the code that I showed you guys. What did I say? app.get/cell checkup, callback 1, callback 2, callback 3. This is my actual route handler. This guy and this guy are middlewares. Middlewares, something sitting in the middle between the route and the final handler, which does some checks. What are those checks? Let's see. Do I zoom in here? There we go. What do I say? I say, I will get rec, res, and next. I'm going to check. Well, the logic is slightly messed up here. I should actually first extract rec, like username and password from rec here. Hopefully you get the idea. I will extract username and password. I will do my checks. If nothing is right, there is something wrong, I will say res.status403.json incorrect inputs. I will return here. I will use the res object and tell the user, bro, sorry, you are done. You have not sent the right inputs. But if everything is fine, I will call next, which would make sure the control reaches kidney middleware. Then control will reach here. Kidney checks would happen. If there is something that's not wrong, I will say res.status403.json, return something bad. Else next, what will it do? Control will reach here. Then my actual kidney logic would kick in. So this is the cleaner way of doing pre-checks by using middlewares. And how do you define middlewares? They are just functions. They take rec, res, and a third thing called next as an input. They perform their pre-checks. They are able to extract username from rec.headers.username. They're able to extract, kidney ID. I have not written that because I wrote this very quickly. But here there will be a line here that will be like const kidney ID equal to rec.query.kidney ID. Then I do the checks. And if anything is incorrect, I return right there. Else I call next, which would make sure the control reaches here. Do we understand middlewares? If you understand this, the class from here is very easy. If we don't understand this, is when we need to spend some more time. This is the only place where I'd like to spend more time. Iske baad it will be smooth, right? So if this is clear, we're good. If this is not clear, I'm happy to explain this further. So 75%, which basically means we will take a pause. We will take a breather here. And we will try to answer some questions from chat. People who understand this, feel free to take a pause. Let me look at some actionable questions here, guys. Which part seems jarring? These are the syntax. Okay, a few good questions. Sorry, I know this happened very quickly. I opened and closed it because, hoping there are some good doubts here. Is this the same as API gateway? No. Can we call next after res.send? You can. The only thing to keep in mind is you cannot call res.send twice or res.json twice. If you call it here and you call next, it is fine. Control will reach here. If you call res.send here the second time, there will be an error. You cannot respond back to an HTTP request twice. Does next take inputs? It does sometimes. It does take inputs, but there are errors. I'm unsure if you can, pass some input here and you can get it here. The way to usually, pass data from here to here is that you add it to the rec object. So you do rec dot user equal to something, and then you can access rec dot user here or here. I'm unsure if you can call next with some arguments. You do call next with some arguments here if you want to throw some error, which is something we can discuss later, but unsure if you call next with some arguments and they reach here. Is it the same as API gateway? No, it isn't. It's running on the same HTTP server. It's just a separate place to do validation checks. That is it. Why are we not using promises in callbacks? I mean, one, there's no real need for a promise here. And two, the Express library is not promiseified. There is another library called Express Promises that does this, but okay. What is the difference between app.use versus app.get in middle? What is the difference between app.use? We will get to app.use very soon. Before we get there, what are the doubts here? After s.send, why have you written return? Where have I written it? Okay, in our original gist, I guess. After res.send, I'm assuming this is where you're asking, why have I written return? I don't have to. It basically makes sure control doesn't go after this. I can totally be like, if else, do all of this. So I can totally do like this as well. What return does is, ki, haan, bhai, the control will not proceed. So you can put return here, or you can add an else here. Both will do the same thing. If you return, means control will never reach here. Or you can be like, I don't need the return. I'm going to do an if followed by an else. Should we add a try catch? We should, but first let's stick to any questions related to middlewares, which is this logic right here. Difference between rest.send and rest.json. Rest.send is for sending text. .send. Rest.json, as the name suggests, is for sending JSON. If you try to send something like this with rest.json, either this will throw the error, or on the client, the response header will not have like application JSON, which will be the problem, I guess. So high level, this is what you will use. You will never use this. Usually transmissions happen via JSON. Okay. So any more questions related to middlewares? Please, no more extra questions. Let's just focus on where we are at right now. The 25% who don't understand, which part seems unclear. Okay. A lot of questions, but we'll see. Why else statement? The rec is already returned with the response, right? Why else statement? Bharat, I did not understand your question. Is DDoS protection part of middleware? Not exactly. DDoS protect, you can do what's called rate limiting here. Rate limiting is usually part of middleware. If you want to make sure a single person can only send 5 requests per second, you can add a middleware here, rate limiter, which does those checks, and then you can just pass them here. By rate limiter, only allow, the thing you get here is like the IP. DDoS is a whole different game. Not seen anyone do DDoS protection here. It's before this. Before the control level reaches here is when you do DDoS protection. You can export functions, middlewares from one class to another. Yes. Last slide, this one. Adding middlewares is again repeating them in each controller. Is it good approach? I mean, how much are you repeating? You are literally repeating nothing. It's not that you will have to repeat, right? This much, so you will have to write. This is fine. This is not dry. You have to call functions. The thing is, the logic is in a centralized place. If there is a change that needs to be made, needs to be made in a single place. This much repetition is needed. I mean, you can also do this further, but don't do it. This is good. This is more readable. Adding middlewares is okay. Where should we have our middlewares in controller or router level? So we haven't yet reached any function. How should you structure your files? How can you import from one file, export to other file? Let's get there when we get there. For now, the goal is even if they're all defined in the same file, do we understand them? No need to explicitly return in the middleware. You don't need to. Even if I have, as you can see, there's nothing returned here. You either rest.send or next. And we'll check both the conditions, or we'll check only one condition. Then how is or correct and is incorrect? Great question. If this is the part that's slightly easier to explain. We'll restart at 7:50, by the way. So okay, 5 minutes of more doubts for people who are waiting. Cool. So yeah, this condition and this condition here and equal to pass. Opposite of this condition and this condition are the same. Try to take a few examples and see. Try to make username here but password incorrect and see, is this true? And is this true? And you'll see that always the result is right. So this is slightly DSA concept. I've written both of these. Take a screenshot, try to marinate it, understand it, ask ChatGPT to explain. Rest.send acts as a return, right? all the lines need next to rest send does not execute if rest dot send executes. You are not right. I can totally be like rest dot send followed by whatever, I can add console.log hi. The log would still happen. Generally, though, what is the you know purpose of this route? Okay, do some computation and return. So ideally, usually this will be the last line only. But that does not mean if you add more lines here, they will not get called. You shouldn't. There is no need for it. But you can still add more lines. If you add something like this, then it's a problem. If you try to send it twice on an HTTP request, it will be a problem. Was body parser also middleware? Great question coming in the next slide. But yes, it was actually a middleware. Alrighty. Let's take 3 more minutes of doubts and then we proceed. Can we take a 5-minute dinner break? Hostel? हाँ break ही चल रहा है, जाओ भाग के. Yeah, you guys can be back in 3 minutes and I'll just go easy initially. So yeah, go for it. Explain once more. Good question. So could you open the comparison slide to see? Okay, great question. This is the old logic. Anytime a route request comes, you do validation check 1, validation check 2, which does call functions. So you've sort of gotten over dry, but not really. It's still a lot of repeated code here and here. So that's first code. Feel free to take a screenshot. What is the second code? It is this. Okay, I have defined 2 functions. They are not standard functions. They don't take inputs and return something. They take request, the request object, the response object, and next as inputs. Next is the new thing we have introduced here. Haan bhai, anytime you're writing a middleware, you will get 3 inputs. This is like this person, right? This person right here. The person who's sitting here on insurance check will do some validations and then boom, be like, next, go to the blood test. And then the person who's sitting here will do your check and will be like, next, if your blood test is fine. If your blood test is bad, he'll be like, sorry, rest.send, get out of here, right? So similarly, what are these 2 middlewares doing? First one is, if the condition is correct, whatever condition it needs to check, then if it is not correct, then it says, get out from here, rest.send something or rest.json something. If the condition is correct though, like next, whoever is the next person, please get called. It doesn't care who the next is. When you define this is a general generic function. It doesn't know, okay, after this will come or something else will come. Whenever you're defining the routes is when you give them the order. By user middleware first, kidney middleware next, or vice versa. Cool. So this is a slightly better approach of, doing something before the actual logic is called. Let me share a few good examples of this. One good example of this is, if you have a handler, a very famous sort of middleware is rate limiter is one that I just showed, but the other one is calculate requests. Just calculating how many requests are hitting your server. You can create a middleware whose sole purpose is increase the number of requests this variable and then call next. That's all that this guy does. And now I can put this middleware here. I can put this middleware in another endpoint, so on and so forth. I defined just a simple function which does nothing, number of requests plus next. And then maybe it also logs number of requests. Now if I run this and if I send it a bunch of requests, you will see 1 got printed. If I keep sending these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I can calculate or count the load that is coming on my server thanks to this middleware. This is one very popular middleware. Cool. 750. So let me do another poll just to make sure how we are doing. And then I think we'll either way proceed. But again, as always, we will take doubts at the very end. And let's not break the flow of the class. Okay, great. ऐसा क्या बता दिया भाई मैंने पिछले 5 मिनट में? Anyways, we are at 92%, which is great. So let's proceed. Again, doubts will be taken at the end. Let's not break the flow. And everything from here is slightly disjoint from this also, and slightly easier than this also. So should be easy to follow. And then middlewares, we'll take another doubt session at the end. Cool. Last thing in middlewares, app.use. Do you guys remember? I kept telling you, please, if you want to get the post body parameters, use app.use. Use app.use. Write this line of code, and only then can you catch any body that Postman sends you, this body right here, in your post request handler. I said you have to do this app.use express.json. And I said, haan, we'll explain later what is this use. This use means कि भैया, this middleware is going to get called everywhere. It is basically similar to, let's say I define my own middleware here. Function, I'd already written a nice one. So this one, as you can see, I had to write it in two places, right? If I know that a middleware needs to be called in every route, I can simply be like app.use middleware. And what will that do? That will be like any request that comes to any route after this line, any request that comes to any route after this line. If this post is above it, then it won't happen for this post. But anything that comes after it, it is the same as putting this middleware here. So app.use, the purpose is, okay, bro, any routes that are coming after this will have this middleware added. And the one that we saw popularly was this one, express.json. Now you might ask, Harkirat, why are you calling it here? We did not call it here. We did not do this. Why are you doing this? The answer is that express.json itself returns a function, which is why this works. This doesn't return like a number. It returns a function in itself, which is why express.json you can call here and call calculate requests you shouldn't call. But app.use says, okay, bhai, now that I've put this, let me actually remove this. Let me do a rest.send JSON message. Hi there. If I run this, you will see that this middleware gets called every time a request goes here. I guess you guys are hitting it. I'm hitting it as well. And you can see this number keeps going at, which means even though I did not pass it here explicitly, it is first getting called. It is calling next, which is why the control is reaching here. If I remove next here, this request will remain hung. This is the same as it's getting here. Just because I've used app.use does not mean that this will be called irrespective. No. Only if this guy calls next will the control reach here, else it won't. Cool. That is what app.use does. It actually takes a middleware only as an input, which means whatever you're sending as an input should ideally be taking 3 arguments, and under some conditions should be calling next, which is what makes it a middleware. And the one that we used was express.json. What is the purpose of that middleware? The code is out there. You can actually go to Express and read it. I don't think it exists in the Express code base. I think it exists in the other one, like the body parser code base. But at a high level, what it does is, any request that is coming, sabse pehle to bhaiya, if I put express.json here, firstly, that request will go where? It will go to whatever function this guy returns. And let's say this is that function. This function actually, extracts the post body, gets these arguments, and actually puts them somewhere so you can access rec.body here. You might ask, Harkirat, why is this body so weird? Why does this body need this thing, but rec.headers doesn't, rec.query doesn't? Good question. The answer someone gave in an existing class was, you don't know what body is. It could be JSON. It could be text. It could be HTML. It could be anything. So the reason you have to specify this specific middleware, please handle it, is because you tell, I am expecting JSON as an input. Please parse out JSON as an input from this specific request. Cool. This was the last thing in middlewares. I think there are some assignments which you should do in your own time. But at a high level, these are what are middlewares. Very sort of jarring concept. At a high level, what is it? It is this. It is the people that sit here and do initial checks before your actual logic gets called. And these initial checks are usually of two types: authentication checks, making sure this user is signed in, Input validation, making sure this user is sending the right inputs to you, which in our case, we said a hard-coded username and password, Harkirat and pass. And we said kidney ID can either be 1 and 2. If it's something else, we will return back wrong inputs to the end user. So we did input validation and authentication the right way. A few assignments to do after this would be count the number of requests, create a middleware that does that. I've already done it. Find the average time your server is taking to handle the request. Try this one out. Yeah, as requests come in, every request will take some time to actually execute. How can you find the total time a request took? You will need two middlewares here, figure something out. Not going to share too much detail, but this is a good assignment to do after the class later on. Cool. Take a breather. We understand middleware. 91% of people do. Baki doubts will come later. Let's proceed to input validation. Why do you need input validation? Let's see with an example. What if the user sends the wrong body? Let's look at this example. Would urge you to code this example locally. I'm going to do the same. So to open this here, going to open. This is the code you need to write. I'm going to write it here on my replit. You should write it on yours. And if you don't understand middlewares yet, forget about them. We'll come to them later. Focus on what's currently on the screen, which is input validation. Const kidneys equal to rec dot body dot kidneys. Const kidney length. Whatever you want. You have kidney length. Kidneys. Cool. Hopefully this is straightforward. User gives you an array of kidneys. So the input expected is kidneys should be something like this, 1, 2 number array. One thing that I'm missing is, since this is a post and this is a body, what am I missing? App.use express.json. When don't use this middleware, body will not get extracted. That's exactly what this middleware does. Cool. Going to give you guys 2 minutes and open chat until then. Feel free to code this on your side. I'm going to open chat. If there are any specific questions until this point, happy to answer. And then strictly at 8, we will proceed. All right. Use middleware etc. function. We calling functions I'll check out, but in Python we call it inside the function. Confusing. So yeah, Python there might be different way to call middlewares. This is how Express does it. In a different library also it will be different to do it. So it's just every library is opinionated that way. Extracting username and password from rec.query will be done in every middleware. Is there some way to use more try here? No, I think this is good enough. I mean, you can create a get username from request, or get user details from request function, but this is enough. Itna bhi deep you don't have to go. What is next? How next knows what to run after the current block? Good question. So, okay, we have 1 more minute. Until then, I'm going to go back a few slides. What did you say? User middleware gets 3 inputs, rec, res, and next. Who does it get these 3 inputs from? Express. Every function, you are passing this function to someone. That someone calls your function, right? You have written that function signature, you write some function signature here. In the end, this function, and this function gets called by someone else. Basically, whoever has written the express calls this with the right inputs. So they give you a next input and they know, okay, haan, bhaiya, this, whenever the request came here, this was the first place, this was the second place, this was the third place. So when you call next here, they realize that yes, user middleware mein next has been called. So I will call kidney middleware. And how that is happening under the hood is express ka logic. This is how they've written middlewares. This is how they call middlewares. Cool. Going to pause it. Again, happy to take doubts at the end. Hopefully you guys have written this code. Run this code. Put the right route. Yeah. This is it. Feel free to look at it. I'm going to open Postman. Paste the input, make it a post, go to body and send. a JSON object as input here. And what are the inputs? Kidneys, which is 1 and 2, let's say. People have 2 kidneys. Post, send request. What does it say? You have 2 kidneys. Some spacing issues, but still pretty okay. You have 2 kidneys. Things are working fine. Let me not send kidneys. I am the user. I can do whatever you want. This is a very common attack vector. कि हाँ भाई backends तो are exposed on the internet, right? Anyone can hit any backend with any input. ऐसा थोड़ी है कि people will always hit your backend with the right inputs. I can send some gibberish here. I can send nothing here. I can send something, but I will not send kidneys. I will make kidneys a number and not an array. Your user can do whatever you want. It is your job here to do what's called input validation to make sure your server doesn't crash. If I send this request with some wrong inputs, let's say nothing I send, and I send the request, what does it say? Some HTML it returns. If I go to preview, what does it say? Cannot read properties of undefined reading length. Your client, if this is ChatGPT backend server and this is Harkirat can now read through, acha, this is what ChatGPT server looks like. It has some node modules here. Okay, got it. This is how I can break their server. This is very bad. This is why you need input validation. Your user will do anything. He'll send a very big string here. He'll send like, I don't know, 25 megabytes of text here. How will you handle that? All these things need to be handled by the application logic because your backend server is out on the internet. Anyone can hit it and anyone can hit it with any inputs. So this is why you need input validation. Specifically for our case, for example, if I was the, writing this specific code, I would do something like this. If not kidneys, which means the user didn't send us anything only, then I do whatever, rest.json, wrong inputs, and then return here, which is the early return that I keep talking about. Or I can do, else do the rest of the things. But I'll have to have like 20 different checks here because, I have to check if it exists. I have to check if it is an array. I have to check if it is an array of numbers. And, 10 different checks I have to do, which is very hard. I can do it. This is how I did it back in college. Whenever I was in college, I would have first 20 or, validation checks at the top. Then I would have, if everything is fine, then my actual logic would kick in. So I would have a bunch of if else here at the top. This is one way of doing it, input validation. And this is very ugly, as you can see. There are better ways to do input validation, which is the Zord library I've been talking about. We will get to that very soon. But before we get there, I want to introduce one more middleware, one last middleware. Don't worry too much about it. You won't use it too much. It's only used once. But there is another type of middleware in JavaScript. Okay? Let me show you what is happening. What is the problem? The biggest problem is that someone else can read your exception. This is bad. If your server has crashed, it has crashed. It's fine. Excuse me, guys. Your end client shouldn't be able to read this. This is a problem. I mean, you shouldn't expose any of your backend logic to the front end code. You might say, okay, this is not much. This is fine. It's not fine. Your end user shouldn't see this ever. They should see some clean. If the server went down and a 500 status code, they shouldn't see this. Express actually takes care of it. If I run Express a Node.js server in production mode, it will not, send this dirty output to the user. But another way to handle this is something called global caches, which is nothing. It's just another middleware that you put at the end. So if you define all of your, routes at the top, at the end, express.json comes before all the routes because this needs to first get called and then the route needs to get called. What you put at the end will get called after these guys. If there is an exception, I repeat, if you define something like this, app.use a function which takes 4 inputs, not 3, r, rec, res, next. If you ever define a function or a middleware like this at the end, which takes 4 inputs, not 3, then anytime there is an exception here, this guy will get called. And here you can do some clean things. You can be like res.json message, sorry, something is up with our server. What will this do? This will say, haan bhai, any of the routes, if ever there is an exception, what is an exception? If you try to access kidneys here, an exception is raised. Cannot read property of undefined reading length. What was I reading? I was reading probably kidneys.length here, const kidney length equal to kidneys.length. Anytime there is such an exception that is raised, it will either reach the end user, or if you add a global catch, or if you add another middleware at the end that takes 4, not 3 inputs, then the control will reach here. And you can do fancy things here. Okay, bhai, I'm going to send a cleaner message. If I run this now and I send erroneous input, you will see it says message, sorry, something is up with our server. Server is responding very clearly. The exception is hidden. This is what is called a global catch. I said you don't have to worry about this too much, because this is just once you have to add this to your code base and forget about it, so that these errors don't propagate to your end user. Cool. What was the high level learning? Yeah, bhai, other than these middlewares, there's another category of middlewares called error-based middleware, something like those you call them, which take 4 inputs, not 3, which are defined at the end after all of your routes. And if there is ever an exception here, control will reach here. So what would be the flow? Currently, if I send this request that you saw in Postman, the control will first reach this middleware. It will extract the body. Then this one, here, exception will be thrown on this line. And rather than it being returned to the end user, control will reach here and the end user will see this. Usually here is where you do, log your error count plus. This sort of keeps a track of the number of exceptions you're getting on the back end. And if this goes above 100, you can alert another system, things like these. You don't actually have a variable here. You have some other place for your putting all of these logs, putting all of these exceptions, so that you can look at them as the developer. So this is another thing that this guy is supposed to do. But for now, simple stuff, straightforward stuff. What's called a global catch? Let's quickly go through the slides and then let's proceed to the next section. Validation. What if the user sends the wrong body? You saw something bad happens. Global catches help you give the user a better error message. Error handling middlewares. That's what these guys are called. This is a special type of middleware function by Express that has 4 instead of 3 arguments: error, rec, res, and next. What is error, Kirat? It basically contains your error object. And this is the exception that happened. You can actually log error here and you will see the same thing that you were seeing here in Postman. It will give you your stack trace. You can do 10 different things with that error object. Not worried too much about that right now. Express recognizes it as an error handling middleware because of these 4 arguments. Express knows कि हाँ भाई, anytime there's an exception in any route, send the control here. What is the purpose of next here, Harkirat? You can have multiple error middlewares as well. So if you want to have one that logs it to a server, second that maintains a track of number of errors that have happened, and third that actually returns this to the user, you can have a chain here as well. Cool. That's done. Middlewares, global catches are done. Authentication and Zod is left. Quick breather here. How are we doing? Doubts till the very end, but let's do a poll to understand. Okay, mota, do we understand middlewares and global catches? As always, happy to take a doubt session after. And if needed, do another offline video with more, real world examples. Okay, that's not great. 83%. It's like, okay. So let's finish authentication and Zod. And let's come back to both of these things. Authentication and Zod are disjoint from middlewares and global catches. So even if you don't understand these right now, you'll be able to understand these. So let's finish this and then we'll come back here. This is also called spaced repetition. We are going to learn one thing and then go to the next thing and then come back to the first thing. Okay? Take a pause here, 2-minute break. We also drink some water and then we will proceed. Quick 2-3 minute break. Meet back at 8:13. Any high level questions until then? Okay, let's see. Firebase authentication is only this fundamentally. No. Completely different. We'll come to it. What if we perform some asynchronous task like fetch or something from database or enter inside the middleware before calling next? You can do it. You can totally be like function middleware rec res next. You can make it an async function, and then you can be like await, fetch, do your thing, and then call next. Or this cannot be an async function. You can be like fetch dot then, and then here you can call next. Either works. What we are calling next? We are not giving any parameter. How does the next middleware know the same parameter? Great question. You call next here with nothing. How did this get called with rec and res? Great question. You are not calling this function. You are calling a function in Express, which is calling the next callback with the right things, which is why you don't have to pass rec or res here. Hopefully that's clear. Does semicolon necessary at the end of the line? No, not in JavaScript. Do you have to define the exception? Do you not have to define the exception? No, 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 no. What do you mean by that? I mean, you can throw exceptions here. That would also do the same thing. You know, control would reach here. Even if you don't throw an exception, if there's a real exception that happens, it goes here. Does next send a request to the next middleware in the same route, or the next call the next user that no, next middleware in the same route? It's not. If you are here at insurance claim and they say next, the JavaScript thread moves to your blood test, then it moves to your BP check, then it moves here. Then you go out, then the next person comes in. Next does not mean that next person should start. Cool. Can't we mention the middleware function by ourselves and call whenever required? Why do we need app.use? You can. App.use is so that you don't have to write it in 10 different places. If you know something needs to be put everywhere, then write a single line of code. Na? Why do you have to write express.json here also, everywhere? Na? 8:13. Let's proceed to the next section, which is how can you do better input validation? Basically introducing Zod. So yeah, as I told you back in college, whenever I created these routes, firstly, I did not even know about HTTP validation. So I would just write normal things, assume the user is sending me the right thing. Never happened. Then I realized, bhai, this is the problem. And it's like very common. Time to go to the iPad here. It is very common to, do input validation. It is a common use case on any HTTP server. This is so difficult. Let's see. There we go. So whenever, irrespective of whether you're writing your backend in PHP, I used to write in PHP back then, in the end, you will have some function that's finally handling your request. And here at the top, I realized eventually you have to do multiple checks. For example, if you are creating an endpoint where user comes to sign up and sign in, what will they send? They will send you an email. They will send you a password. You need to make sure the password is, strong. So password needs to be at least 6 digits. So letters should have a capital, should have a small, so on and so forth. These conditions need to be met for this. And email needs to be a valid email. You cannot send, ABC here. It needs to be abc@gmail.com, something like that. So usually you have to do a lot of these input validation checks here. And it's very hard to keep track of the amount of validations you have to do. For that reason, came into existence a bunch of input validation libraries. Their sole purpose is, okay, bhai, don't worry about this. You tell me what do you expect. I will internally do all the checks. You tell me, acha, you need username as one field, email as one field. This needs to be at least 3 digits or whatever. 7 digits. This needs to look like an email. It's fine. I have all of that logic. I will do it for you. You don't have to worry about writing this ugly logic at the top of your route. You just have to do one call and you have to tell me the structure of your input. Zod is one of such libraries. There are many, but the most popular one in Node.js is Zod. So that's what we will explore next. Okay, how can you use Zod to do input validation the right way? Okay. What is input validation the wrong way? It is this that you see on the screen right now. Okay, you put a bunch of manual checks here. Better way to do it is this. Now, here is where we will understand Zod a little bit. Let's actually go to Zod's GitHub and see what they say. Look at their documentation. What do they say? What is Zod? TypeScript first schema validation with static type inference. Oh, too many things here. Ignore static type inference. Ignore TypeScript first. Just focus on this. Schema validation. Until we are using JavaScript, this is all we are using Zod for. Eventually, we will understand what this is, what this is. For now, schema validation. Okay. Bunch of things. Let's start with installation. What does it say? Ignore, ignore, ignore. npm install Zod. Just how we brought Express to our machine, we will just bring Zod at this point. I would urge you to now start coding locally. Okay? You can code here as well, by the way. Just, import Zod at the top here. It will automatically bring it to your machine. But okay, let's just do it here. Let's keep things simple. Okay? So we don't have to do this. Replit sort of does it for us. All that we have to do is add this at the top. Const z equal to require Zod. You can also be like const Zod equal to. You can name it whatever you want. Okay? I have imported another library. Let's go back here. Basic usage. Let's see how do they say, okay, how can you use Zod to do parsing? What are you doing effectively? You are parsing the input from the end user. Okay, हाँ भाई, are you sending me the right thing? That's what's called parsing. Okay? One way to do it is this. You define the schema. Okay, bhai, this is what the input should look like. Z dot string. Now, what is Z, Harkirat? It is something that Zod, the library, returns you. What is Z dot string, Harkirat? It is just calling a function on whatever Z this library returned you. And what does this function do, Harkirat? It tells Zod कि हाँ भाई, this is my schema. This is what my input should look like. And then whenever you call my schema dot parse, or ignore this, my schema dot safe parse and give it a string, it will either return success true or return success false based on whether or not a string was passed as an input. Can you guys guess where I'm going with this? What do you have to do at the top here? What is kidneys? Kidneys is an array of numbers. I said that or not? Kidneys can only be an array of numbers. I said I can either do manual checks here or ignore this. Keep this. Ignore this. I can either do 1,000 checks here. Ki haan, is the input correct? Have they sent me an array of numbers? Or I can simply be like const schema equal to Zod dot array of Zod dot number. What did I say? कि हाँ भाई, an array of numbers is what my schema will be. This much is enough to describe the structure of your input, which in our case is an array of numbers. This is just the syntax for it. Question is, how do you actually validate it? The answer is this. Const response equal to schema dot safe parse the input that the user has sent, which in our case is kidney. This response, let's return back to the end user. Let's just say rest.send response. Okay. You give an kidney input, we pass that input to schema.safe parse, and we return back to the end user. Take 30 seconds to code this locally, or let me just paste it on a gist. That's actually easier. All right. I'm going to give you guys 10 more seconds to bring this in your own replets. Tomorrow onwards, you'll have to move locally, by the way. So today is the last day we use Replit. Tomorrow onwards, make sure you have Node locally, and only then we'll be able to proceed. All right. Run this. First thing it runs, npm install Zod. Thankfully, Replit just does it for you. Whenever you introduce a new library, they install it. All right, seems to be running. Let me go here. Oh, it's a post request. So let me go to my postman here. Let me send the request with wrong inputs. My body is empty. I think this might, okay, this might work. Yeah, let's see. Send it. What does it say? Success, false, error, invalid type, expected, array, received, undefined. Zord gives you everything. कि हाँ भाई एक तो success is false. पहली चीज तो ये कि this hasn't passed the validation. Also gives you a bunch of error messages. These are super useful if you want to show the user this on the UI. If the user is on a login page of, let's say, whatever, facebook.com, and they give some erroneous inputs, they, pass something like this, ASDH. This should have been an email, or they give like a one letters password and click on login. Zord will give you, हाँ भाई, this is incorrect. You can actually show that as a pop-up here. That's the benefit of the other things it gives you, this issue section. Even if you ignore this, success false is great. You can simply check. You can simply check if not response.success, then, rest.json, whatever, sorry, status for 11.json message input is invalid. Or if you want to give a better, like more descriptive issue, you can from here. Even if you don't, it's fine. Main thing is having this if else check here. Cool. Stop this, rerun this. Now in just one line of code, I was able to do input validation. Of course, there's more here. This is where, this is where the meat of your uh, energy will go, trying to describe this for every input, having a different schema described for every route of yours. But once you have that, you can simply, call that input is invalid. Let me pass the right input. Kidneys is an array of numbers. And then if I send it, it's a response success. I can actually give a better response here, but you get the idea. Why is this cool? Again, because one line of code did everything. What is still difficult is this, Sakyat. How did you describe this? Great question. Let's write a few more. Let's say your input that you're expecting from the end user is supposed to be like this. An array that looks like this. Username, which is a string, email, which is a string that looks like an email. So it needs to validate that it has an @ in the middle, it has a .com or .something at the end. Okay? It needs to do this validation. And a password, which is at least 8 whatever letters. And a country which is either in, which means India, or let's say US. Okay? User needs to give you 3 things. How will you write the Zord schema for this? It will look something like this. Const schema equal to Zord.object. Okay, bhai, the top level thing needs to be an object. And the object needs to have 3 fields. Email, which is a string. So Zord.string. Password, which is also a string. There are more conditions. We will get to them. And country, which is either literal, means it's literally this specific string in, or literal US. Cool. This last one might feel a little tricky. How are you doing ors and ands here? It's just the syntax of Zord, unfortunately. You keep getting nested and nested. For example, let's say this, I said this has a kidneys array object as well. You would have had to write, kidneys z.array. And then here you would have had to write, z.number, so on and so forth. So this object can get more and more complex. This is super important to spend some time on, though, understanding how you can create schemas, because we will need this as we go into more concepts in the future. So get comfortable with the syntax of writing / describing your schema. And then calling it is much easier. You just have to do this schema dot save pass in the input from the user, and make sure, this succeeds. If it does succeeds, do the thing. If it does not succeed, then return a 411. Okay, bhai, the inputs are incorrect. Please fix them. Want more descriptive errors? Send more descriptive errors. Do we understand this? How can you create Zod schemas? Let's do a poll. Great. Not a lot of people understand. कोई बात नहीं. Forget about Express. Forget Express exists in the library. Forget you are creating an HTTP server. Create a function, validate input, that needs to validate an input that comes in. यहाँ it's an array of strings. ठीक है? If it is an array of strings, return true, else return false. How would you write it? I will tell you how you will write it. You will be like, if type of array, or you can be like, if array.length exists, then maybe this is an array. Type of is probably a better way. Okay, you'll do a bunch of checks. If type of array equal to whatever this is, I think it is either object or array. Let's see. Type of object is equal to object and array.length is greater than equal to 1. Return false array of strings with at least one input. Okay, this is your assignment, your question that you have to fix. Given array as an input, return true or false based on whether or not it's an array of strings. How will you do it? You'd put a bunch of checks here. Okay, this and array of 0 ka type is a number. This is also not enough. You'll have to actually check all the elements. You'll have to put a for loop, something like this. Everything is a number. What is every here? Ignore. But at a high level, you have to do a bunch of things here. If you using Zod, all you had to do was const Zod equal to require Zod. One line of code. Const schema. You can define it inside as well. Schema equal to Zod dot array. Okay, bhai, the input needs to be an array. So my schema is this. Don't even worry about anything else. Don't pass in any input. I think you might have to. It needs to be an array of something, which in this case is a number. I don't know if I've written it here, but you get the array of strings. Let's make it number. All right. Okay, bhai, schema needs to be an array of strings or whatever number. This is nothing. This doesn't do any validation yet. This is like defining a function. I will call the function here const response equal to schema dot validate array. And then let me just log response. So forget Express totally. Just focus on Zod. Zod can be used independent of Express as well. It's a validation library. You tell it a schema, you give it an input, it will tell you whether or not the input follows the schema. So if I call this and if I run it, what do you think will get logged? An error will, because I wrote Z here, I should have written Zod. Schema.validate safe parse. That's my bad. Called the wrong function. And lastly, it says success true data something. Ignore data. Success true. Let me pass something incorrect here. Just one thing I'll pass incorrect. First one I'll make a string. The rest I'll still keep as numbers. Success false. So this one line of code was able to do what I had to write like a very big if check for, right? So that is why you use sort. Does not have to be used with Express. And as your use cases get more complicated, for example, as I said, the use case could be validate an object. which looks something like this. Email and password. You can email string should look like email. Password should have 8 letters. Then you can be like const schema equal to z dot object. Okay, the top level thing needs to be an object, and the object needs to have 2 fields. So email, which is z dot string, and thankfully it just gives you something called email that you can chain along, and it will perform the email validation checks for you as well. And similarly, password z dot string dot min 8. So it will just give you a bunch of these constructs which you can read here if you want to. For example, these are the primitives it gives you: z dot string, z dot number, z dot boolean, z dot date. And you can, if you keep scrolling, you'll find a bunch of extra things you can do. Z dot string dot max 5, which will validate whether or not a string is maximum 5 digits or 5 letters. Exactly 5 letters, minimum 5 letters, so on and so forth. Dot email will validate whether or not this input is a real email or not. So if I say, bhaiya, validate an object here that looks something like this, make sure it has 2 arguments, email and password, and this follows the email pattern. This has at least 8 letters. You can define the schema like this. Feel free to copy this on your machine. I'm not going to change the screen from now. I'm just going to change what I am calling it with. So if I call this with an array, give me an exception because again, I'm using Z instead of Zod. Depends. You can import this as Z and then call Z here. You can import this as Zod. You can call Zod here. R is not defined. OBJ. Success false. This thing does not follow this schema. But if I pass something like this, email arkirat@gmail.com, password at least 8 letters. If I run this, success true. Let me make this 1 letter only. Success false. Why? Because I said minimum 8 letters the password should have. Similarly, let me make this an invalid email. Success false. If I make it a valid email, invalid email, and even if I pass the right password, it will give success false. But if I give it the right email syntax, then it will just work. So forgetting about Express and HTTP, do we understand Zod as an independent library that lets you validate an input given a schema, lets you create a schema, and lets you validate an input on that schema? This much part, do we understand? Great. Do we now automatically understand HTTP-ifying it? कि हाँ भाई, if there is an Express server, how can you use this for input validation there? Or do I need to re-explain that? 1 second. Oh, we can have it go. Okay, I guess you get the idea, hopefully. Do we understand ki, how I can use Zod in an HTTP server at the top of my route to do input validation? Or should we go through that again? Do we understand that? Okay, that we are shaky about. That we don't understand. Koi problem nahi. Great. Let me rewrite this. I have written not the array. Let's go back to the object. There we go. Now you guys said you understand this, right? I have written a validate input function. Let's say I'm creating a route, an HTTP route, where people, the route that Facebook would hit in this case. What are the inputs? Uh, email, password. User clicks on login. What happens? An HTTP request goes out. What are the inputs to the HTTP request? If you look at them, bunch of things. Where does it send it? Headers. Here only it will be. ASD. There you go. Inputs are going. Password will also go. The password was empty, but if it was a valid password, it would go. This is an HTTP call. Harkirat, why is it not going out of Postman? How is it going out of browser? We will get to it. But I can send the same request from Postman. I can actually right click here, click on copy as curl. I can go to Postman. I can click on import. Here, I can click on raw text. I can paste the whole thing I copied. I can click on continue. I can click on import. This gives me the route, the post request, the body, which has, a bunch of things. It is not raw. It is wxww form encoded. Don't worry about what it is. Has my email, has my password. Okay. This is a request. Let's try to create a similar request for our backend. Let's say we were creating Facebook today. What would we write if we were creating Facebook today? We would be like, app.post / login or sign up or login. Okay. Function rec, res. If const whatever inputs equal to rec.body. Now here I need to check ke bhaiya they have actually sent me a right valid email or not. So I need to check whether or not email is an input and password is an input. Haven't I written the schema for it already? Can't I just call this validate object? Const response equal to validate object input with rec.body and be like, if not response.success, if this function is telling me ki, haan, bhai, the end user hasn't sent me the right thing, then simply return here and send the user rest.json message, your inputs are invalid. So once this function is written, I can either call it myself to test it with a few inputs, email, password, whatever. Or whenever I've written an HTTP call, I can call this validate input function there. The end user, whatever they sent me over here in the body, which assuming in our HTTP server, the body is something like this. Whatever they're sending here is incorrect or correct. The schema can be validated by this function. If it is not correct, early return. If it is correct, then you return whatever you want. Now, do we understand Zod? Now, we will have to proceed either way. But I hope there are more questions. I can take them at the end. Okay, great. 96%. Beautiful. All right, guys. Zod is done. What is left? Feel free to look at, the documentation. This is just a few things I have posted. These are the primitives. We already saw this. There's something called coercion, which I also learned that this is a word today only. And, its meaning apparently is to push someone to do something. For example, I can do a coercion on Harnoor to give us his Android course. Haha. So coercion means to push someone to do something. Similarly, Zod is very strict. If you tell it, haan, bhai, z.string and you pass it 12, it will be like success, false. Sorry, this is not a string. But 12 is sort of a string. You can convert it to this, right? Similarly, true, sort of a string, you can convert it. So if you want to be slightly lean with your validation, then you can use coerce. You don't have to understand this. I just saw this today, felt interesting, so I kept it here. If you understand this, you're solid. There are a bunch of types here. Don't worry too much about them. High level, we need to understand string, array, object, number, boolean. These 5 we understand, we're sorted. You can create an object, we're good. Cool. All of this is done. What is left is authentication. This part is important, and it's 8:40, which means, you guys are sweating. So am I. Let's take a 4-minute break. Let's do a quick intro to authentication after that. Let's call it for today. Let's cover authentication tomorrow. Let's cover maybe file system based databases, but mostly let's just cover MongoDB tomorrow. So let's do authentication in MongoDB tomorrow, but little intro to authentication I will give today. Until then, let's take a break. Let's open chat. How are we doing? And of course, there is a doubt session at the end, so don't worry. We'll cover middlewares again, more questions. Let me answer a few questions by the time you guys take a break. Okay. Can we do custom validation logic inside Zod? What do you mean by custom validation logic? You can. Achha, you want to be like, this specific thing, I want to do this. I'm sure Zod provides away. Just ChatGPT will give you. Explain why brackets are used in express.json. Great question, Harkirat. Why are app.use express.json? Why did you use brackets here when usually you created your own middleware? You simply did this. What if I did this? Function middleware returns a function, which is the actual, rec res next, and this has the logic. Now you will do this, right? You will have to call middleware, which will return you the right thing, which has rec res next and calls next, whatever. Similarly, whoever wrote express.json wrote it in a way, yeah, bhai, this will return you a function, and then that function is what you need to put here. That's why you have to call it. Why does inner logic inside app.get calls the global catch if error is there? Who does exactly calls the global catch? How does express.json contain the next function? Oh, so how does express.json contain the next function is the same as this. You called middleware here. Middleware returned a function. This function has next. App.use finally got this function as the input, right? You called middleware here, which is similar to you doing this, or even this. When you do express.json, similar to doing this. Const final function equal to this, and then passing the final function here. Now this final function will look something like this. Yeah, it will have rec res and next. And then you told Express, okay, bhaiya, this is the final thing you need to worry about. Forget Express JSON. You take the output from here, put it here. Now this function is this. Express comes to know about it. Express calls the right things. So does the inner logic in app.get? Okay, how does there's an app.get here, Harkirat? And there is an error thrown here, new error. How does the control reach this specific, middleware, error middleware that you define at the end? Great question. This is how middlewares. How does the control reach here? If I do a app.use express.json, just 45 we will start, guys. I'll give a brief intro about authentication. If I do this, how does it reach here before reaching here? That's just how the maintainers of Express have written it, right? Ki, haan, bhai, if there are any middlewares, they first get called. If there is a next call in there, then these get called. If there is an exception thrown here, then this gets called. This is how they've written the middleware logic. Haan, bhai, all middleware will get called one after the other. If there's an error, then no more middlewares will be called. We will directly move to the exception middleware. If middleware is added in app.use, it will always take first callback slot. If middleware is added in app.use, will it always take first callback slot? If you, yes, exactly. You can say that. If I add an app.use, this thing, it is similar to this thing being present here. It has taken the first slot in all the routes. That is why you have to use app.use. Otherwise, you don't need app.use. You can just put them here. App.use, what does it do? It puts it in all the routes. Zod will basically tell us to store a blueprint of the inputs against which we do validation. Correct. Exactly. Zod will tell us, okay, bhai, give me the blueprint, give me the structure. I will validate the real object when it comes. I think Zod is same as Express Validator, probably. Kidney. We can validate from the front end and also send. Yes, you can validate from the front end. But as I said, people are notorious. They will send you anything. They will bypass your front end checks. They will copy your request from curl, bring it here, and change it however way you want. Front end checks are never, you can never trust them. So for that reason, you need to have validation on the back end. You can make your own validator file. Can we make a validator file? Yeah, you can create a different file, export variables from there, import them here. You don't have to have everything in the same file. Export imports you can do normally. We'll discuss very soon how you can do that, like next class or something. If we handle the error inside the controller and send the error response to the controller, will the control move to the global catcher? What will be this exact flow? Route, middleware 1, middleware 2, controller, global catch. Wherever the exception is thrown, no more middlewares will be called after that. It will directly move to the global cache. It will not reach the controller if the exception is in middleware 1. Wherever the exception is, no more middlewares are being called. Directly it will move to the exception middleware. All right. 46. So let's proceed. Little bit high level. Let me give you of authentication before tomorrow. Then we'll do doubts. So भैया authentication is, अभी तक तो we have been very dumb in our approach. We have said anyone can call any route blast. कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Only thing we added little bit was कि हाँ, we put some, you know, check here कि हाँ, only the person who has username Harkirat and password pass will be allowed to call these routes. So some very basic authentication we did. But you can't expect the user to always give this, right? If you go to facebook.com, you don't always sign up, you give your username password and then send it. Then you reach another page and then you don't have to give username password again, right? It somehow gets stored somewhere. You give it once, it gets stored somewhere. And then in every subsequent request, it is sort of automatically sent. That is the right way to do authentication. As you can tell by now, anyone can send requests to your backend. They can just go to Postman and send a request. How do you ensure that this user has access to a certain resource? You can create a dumb middleware like we did the authentication middleware, or you can do authentication the right way. Dumb way, ask the user to send username and password in all requests as headers. We did this few slides ago. Not the best way to do it. Slightly better way. Give the user back a token on sign up or sign in. Ask the user to send back the token in all future requests. When the user logs out, ask the user to forget the token. So the way authentication happens in the real world, and we will again cover this tomorrow. So if you don't understand this right now, it's totally, oh, okay, let me connect my iPad here. There we go. This is your backend server. Could be like the Facebook backend server, could be the ChatGPT backend server, whatever. This is your browser. The first time you're in the browser, you put in an email and password in some input boxes. You click on a button that sends a request to the backend with your email and your password. The backend pay some app.get. The callback gets called. Control reaches here. Here, what do? Number one, they check whether or not you're a valid user. For that, they use databases, which will come out tomorrow. So don't worry about it too much. Somehow they validate. Yeah, is this user correct? Yes, they are. If it is, it returns you back a token. What does a token look like? Some TARPQ, some random gibberish. Very long string it will give you back. You store it somewhere. Usually you store it in the browser. More specifically, there's something called the local storage. We will cover this tomorrow, so don't worry. You store this somewhere in your browser. Now, every request that you're sending, okay, give me back my existing prompts to ChatGPT, let's say. Or if you're on Facebook, you're sending a request, give me back my /posts, give me all the feed that I have. You send this token along. Server doesn't check your username password anymore, just checks the token and returns back the response. Harkirat, why this whole token mumbo jumbo? Why can't we just take the email and password, put it in local storage, and then user can just send the email and password in every request? I can just at the back end take the email password, do my standard validation. Why the first hop? When you're signing in, give me email password, I'll give you back a token. And then every subsequent request takes a token. Why this? Why not store this directly in the local storage? The answer is that local storage is very public. And you don't want to put someone's password there. You can put some token there. Tokens are transitory. You can revoke them from the backend. You can do a few things. What you cannot do is, someone's password is there, and it somehow gets exploited, and then you can't revoke the password from the backend. This is one reason. 1,000 other reasons for you to use token, and do things this way rather than storing the email and password in the um, this thing right here, browser. Many times I have opened ChatGPT for you in front of you guys. A bunch of times I've opened it and said, bro, I'm going to send a message. Look at the HTTP request that goes out. And whenever I've gone here, I've been very cautious कि भाई देख लो जो देखना है. Whatever you want to look at, you can. But in my request headers, as soon as I reach this section called authorization, I stop. I say इससे ज़्यादा मैं नहीं दिखाऊंगा. I won't show you anymore. Why is that? Because this is that token. If I give you this token, what will you do? You will be like, okay, I have Harkirat's token. I'm going to copy. You will send the same request on your server. You will say, I'm going to copy this as curl. I'm going to go to Postman, import my own request. So on your machine, you will import your own ChatGPT request. And you will go to headers. You will go to authorization. You will take my token that you just saw here. This thing right here. You will paste it here. You will click on send. And ChatGPT will think Harkirat is sending requests when you are. And you can start using my credits. So the right way to do authentication, any website you go to, every request that's going out, once you've signed in, is sending either an authorization header, which means a header that has the title authorization, just how I had like a username header and password header in the beginning of the class. And this token, how do you generate it? Why does it say bearer here? How do you validate it on the backend? Are things we will discuss tomorrow. Okay? So we will create a sign-in request where user comes, signs in, gets back a token. We will create a few routes which will be protected, which means user will have to send this authorization header. Only then will we allow, else we won't allow. And we will introduce MongoDB tomorrow and how you can start storing data inside a database. Cool. That is going to be tomorrow, 8:53. Time for a doubt session. So would love to hear any questions around middlewares or otherwise. If you understand everything, let me do a poll. Overall, the class, good, fast, slow. Let's do a poll. And then people who want to leave can leave. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Other people who have doubts can stick back, but don't have to stick back for the next 30 minutes in case you understand everything. All right. Beautiful. Little bit fast. So 10% is fast. It's not a little bit. It's increasing a little bit. Oh my God. So 80% says perfect. 6% slow, 14% fast. So I would urge now, okay, 14% stick back. And everyone else, feel free to call it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm just going to take a bunch of doubts. And since it's only 14%, it will be easy for me to take doubts because I'll be able to read through questions. All right. We need a better doubt asking platform, by the way, if someone can create it, where people can come and upvote and I can see the most upvoted doubts. All right. Opening the chat. Brace yourself. Yep. There are more questions here than the people who said the class was fast. So a bunch of random questions as well. Okay. 1 lakh people are hitting our endpoint. The requests are getting blocked in a queue due to JavaScript being single-threaded. Yes, that is exactly true. That is why you either run multiple Node.js machines or you auto scale. But yes, if 1 lakh people are sending a request together, they'll get blocked. Not blocked, but like they'll wait in the queue for a long time. Why don't you use middlewares in GET requests? You can use middlewares in GET requests. When did I say you cannot? App.get, add a middleware here. It's just ki this specific middleware is for extracting the body arguments. And whenever you're sending GET requests, most of the times you don't send body, you send a query parameter. Query parameter, Express understands by default. You don't need a middleware for it. Why is rec.body.kidney not returning a number and returns nan when doing parse int? Well, that means you're not passing the right thing. Let me show you on my machine and you will see it will work on my machine. Const kidney number equal to parse int rec dot, did you say body or did you say query? Body dot kidney. Body dot kidney. What do you think will get logged here? If I pass 1 as an input, it will be 1. What you might be missing is number 1, you're not using this. That is it. That's all you're missing. If you're try to log rec.body.kidney, see if it is, something like this. It is a string that's 1. And then parse int should parse it to, 1. It should not be an. Zod didn't provide error info about email being wrong. Then how can you show to the user? It should, let's see. I mean, maybe it doesn't actually. Const z equal to require Zod. Const schema equal to z dot email. Sorry, string const response equal to schema dot parse console.log response dot errors. Okay, let's see. Is not better than Joy package. I don't know what Joy package is. I'm assuming it's so it says invalid email, right? You got the right message. What else do you need? It won't give you ekdam ki, haan, this is what is wrong, that is what is wrong, but you're missing an @ or whatever. It gave you invalid email. That's you show that error to the user. The user is good. All right. I don't know what Joy is, so I can't comment on that. I haven't used that library basically. Please tell most effective way to secure approach user authentication and incorporating various methods such as email, password. Is password just good or anything else exists? Will you teach? Yeah, so we will learn Google GitHub authentication when we reach the next auth section. We will basically not use password. We'll use next auth, which is the right way to do authentication, like the best way to do authentication today. Next, there you will understand all of these things. Where do you control go when you early return in the route function? It stops. Console.log, whatever. Let's take an input. If A is greater than 2, return. Else do something, whatever, return A plus B, whatever. What happens if I early return here? Whoever is calling it just gets back, undefined. That's it. The control does not reach after this. Where does it go? It goes to the same place where it goes even if the if wasn't called. If, early return doesn't happen and, you do a rest.send here or whatever, wherever the control would go after this, the same place it would go after if you return here. Why not use MVC architecture define schemas, action library? We'll get there when we get there. Long way to go before we reach there. Charge laptop, I think it is charging. Real-time middleware usage. What does real-time middleware usage mean? Can we, depending on schema in Zod, can we write depending schema on Zod? For example, if I ask for an age input and a DOB input and user is giving 23 as age and something is input, then this will be wrong. Oh, can you do validations like this? I don't know if, I mean, you could probably, put your own logic below this if you want to do validation like this. Usually you won't ask the user for both of these things. You'll ask them for one, either their age or the date of birth. Usually you just ask them for the date of birth and then go from there. But if you have to do this, maybe it's not provided, maybe it is not. Too deep for a question for me to answer here. Look at the docs, you'll find your answer there. Too much information overload, but I think we'll be good with the revision. Yeah. High level, it's 4 things we have learned. 4 we have 3 things we learned. Middlewares, which is the most difficult concept today, global caches and Zod. Forget authentication. I'm assuming Zod is easy. Global caches, even if you don't understand, it's fine. It's just one thing to introduce. Middlewares is important, especially, authentication middlewares, because we will use them very effectively in the videos to come. Okay, I will upload the video, like should be up within 3 to 4 hours. It takes time to process. I want to use Firebase as backend and give the auth from Express. Is it possible? Firebase is backend, auth from Express. It is possible. It is possible. You will have to protect your, if you're using Firebase as the database, just use Firebase for authentication as well. Your life will be much easier. Or generally don't use Firebase as a database, is the high level advice. How do we know what exactly went wrong with Zod? Success false is good enough, right? Success false is good enough. Return the user. If you want to know what went wrong, it gives you a bunch of messages. And there are a few libraries on top of this that actually give you much better error responses, or tell you this field is incorrect, things like these. But I mean, false is good enough. Now you tell your end user, bro, something is incorrect. Bigger goal for you is to protect your backend. And if there is any wrong input, you stop right there. Don't really worry about what is the actual error message. Authentication will be covered tomorrow. Can you post more offline videos on Express, middlewares, global caches? Yeah. If needed, we will do it next week. Express, we've done a lot. Next week, middleware is one thing I can clearly see. I will create another video on with real world examples. Can we use Zod thingy in middleware? Yes, you can totally. It is just another function call, right? It is just whatever z dot safe parts. You can call it anywhere. You can call it inside a middleware. So can you show the Zod errors to the user? You can. You can just send this to the front end and show them, bros, invalid email. You can show them. A lot of companies do that. Zord can be middleware. Zord can be middleware is weird, but inside a middleware, you can parse Zord. Like you can call z.safe parse or schema.safe parse. Can you please provide open source related videos in ad hoc section, like how to get started in open source and navigate the projects? Yeah. GSOC wali videos will come now. That's where I'll spend most of my time whenever I have extra time to create GSOC videos and not you know these validation videos. What do you call it? Non-validation. Express videos I'll create and GSOC. Now basically very basic and very advanced sites where I'll focus on it offline now. Can you use multiple catches if issuance error, issuance specific error? If blood tests, then use blood specific catch? Not exactly. I mean, maybe you can. I don't know. Most probably no. You cannot conditionally call if I have a app.use here. I can't conditionally call it, right? कि हाँ भाई, this specific route clear and this specific route cannot run. Similarly, if you have error middleware, probably cannot call them, for one and not for the other. If you want to do that, then you should use, the try catch. You should just wrap your this thing inside a try catch, which we can come to eventually. Can you explain global catches once again? Sure. Const express equal to require express. Const app equal to express. App.get slash throw new error. No. Console.log rec.body.kidneys not length. JSON done. If you just write this code and you send an erroneous input, which means kidneys does not exist or whatever, then what does your end user see? What am I missing here? App.get slash express. Oh, yeah, there you go. This is what the end user sees. If I go and hit this request inside Postman, the end user sees, oh, the hell. What is the URL? Basically this. User sees this. Cannot read properties of undefined kidneys. This is a very bad error to send to your end user, right? So I say, okay, bhai, rather than let your code be as it is, but at the end, add this. Rest.send. Internal error. And now, even though an exception is still being thrown here because body has nothing, so .body.kidneys is undefined, so .body.kidneys.length will throw an exception. The end user won't see the bad error. The end user simply sees message internal server error. So this is the benefit of just adding this much. You just have to understand the syntax for it and understand, yeah, this is a global catch. This is anything goes wrong anywhere, control reaches there, you send to the end user a pretty message. The other things you usually do here is, put these logs on a server so you can later on track it. But high level authentication, we will understand more. Authorization code, the same for all. It means every time all the same. Is authorization code is same at all for means? Yeah, thoda, can you rephrase the question? Zord didn't provide error. It did, right? I showed you a while back. If we define a middleware function, since it is a normal function, how does it know what next is here and rec is here and rest will be passed as an argument? Great question. But not next. But not next. We define a middleware function. Since it is a normal function, how does it know what is next here as rec and rest will be passed as an argument, but not next? Who said next was not passed as an argument? We just don't, write it out. If I write it out, even in this final handler, I think now I could be wrong here. This could be blue. This could blow up on my face. 99%. There you go. Function next. Function next. Even in our final routes, next exists. We just did not, take it as input. Never called it. But does not. Whoever calls this does not matter if it is a middleware function. You pass bunch of functions. You pass. All these functions receive 3 inputs only: rec, res, next. Depends if you are the last one. There's no real point of you calling next. There is actually a point, but forget that point. If you're the last one, you don't have to call next. So we never, put it here. It is similar to, mm, कैसे समझाऊं ये मतलब you can always, pass a callback function. And as long as you don't need an argument, you don't have to define it here. You can just, not define it. Very bad way of explaining what I just explained here. But the high level being, okay, this gets always confusing. Where did this come from? Where did this come from? Who called this? And the answer is, someone else calls this. More specifically, Express calls this function and any other callback that you send here. And Express knows, yeah, this is a callback for a handler or this is a middleware. So let me send rec res and next, it sends you everything. I have a token of another user, then I can access the account. Yes, you can. I mean, so Facebook, the things that we'll build in the next few weeks, in those websites, you 100% can. Facebook does a bunch of other things. ChatGPT will have, maybe does, maybe it does not. There are like a few, other headers here, specifically fingerprints, based on which you can avoid this. But yes, sure. If most websites for the longest time back in college, when we used to use Facebook, we would get someone's cookie or token and then, log in as them. What do you mean different type of authentication? We will learn just simple JWT based authentication, then a little bit of cookies, and then we just move on to, how Google, Facebook do it in Nextauth, and then there we'll understand, refresh tokens, access tokens, things like these. Can we validate that the email must have had Google at the end? Yeah, I'm sure it lets you do something like, z.string dot email dot ends with or something like that. So you can do something like that. I'm sure Zod provides you something. How much we revise before tomorrow's class? I make sure you understand everything you've learned today, but other than that, you'll be fine. Can we group all the middlewares in an array and send example if we have more than 10? Can we group all the middlewares in an array? You can. I mean, you can do something like this. Basically, const middlewares equal to, express.json, comma, let's say, some user validator, comma, kidney validator. And then you're going to be like, app.gets this thing, dot middlewares and this. I think this will work. Most probably this syntax lets you, spread this array here as individual values. Few questions. Express function, its syntax that first is request and response parameters. What is the difference between single quotation and double quotation in string? Is it mandatory to use? So does, I mean, I'm sure there's some difference, does not matter anyway. You put whatever you want. Generally, companies prefer single quotes. I think I could be wrong. Some you can just set a standard and then throughout the code base that standard will be used. I don't understand your second question. Is the syntax the first request response parameter? Yeah, I don't understand the first question, Ripple. Isn't middleware supposed to be different server? No, it depends on the context in which you're using middleware. But here, no. Here, middleware, same server. Difference between z.string, z.string. Depends on what you have imported, sir. I can import express as express2. वो तो मेरे पे depend करता है ना. Express2. I can name this app2. I can name this app2. Similarly, I can be like const zod equal to require zod. Or I can be like const z equal to require zod. So whatever I import it as, I will use. Why is the parameter required in global catches? Well, global catches. You can probably log, this is the user who is facing an issue. So it's required because you can use it for 100 different things, right? Yeah. This is a user that's facing an issue. This is an IP that's facing the issue. You have a bunch of information requests that you can log somewhere and then, later debug. How passing data is different from rec.header, rec.query, rec.params or cookies? What are the use cases? Great question. High level. Whenever you're sending a get request, you use query parameter. Whenever you're sending a post request, you use body. Whenever you're sending sensitive information, like these tokens that I was talking about, headers. Whenever get me, you can use parameters as well, or what do you call it? Query params or like normal parameters. And yeah, that's it. Cookies is just another header. So cookies, very sensitive information, which is why you send it a header. Cookies specifically doesn't mean anything. It's just a header. So yeah, it's a high level of how you would choose one. In the end, does not matter. It matters on you as a developer, what backend code you're writing, and then you own the front end code as well. You just send the similar calls from the front end. Can I have two global clutches? Yes, you can have one below the other. If you call next here, it will control the reach the next one. If there are two middlewares that need different inputs, do we need to send all query parameters to the middleware? Is there a way to send required inputs to middleware? No. So it will get the complete request object. That request object, it can extract the body, the query parameters, the headers, whatever it wants. It has access to everything. Bank does store tokens. What does that mean? What is the difference between client and side access.post and app.post in Express? Great question. Client side axios.post is for sending requests. It's a code that runs in your browser. Harkirat, app.post is also running in the browser. No. This code, Replit just makes it easy for you to write it here. It is running on some backend machine of Replit, or I can just move this code locally. So this is for creating a route. That is for calling a route. That is for sending a request to a route. Can we use the same backend for website and app too? Yeah, you can. That's usually how it happens most of the times. I missed Express class. I couldn't understand some parts. What should I do? Go through the Express class and come back to this one. In production, do we define our middlewares? Yeah, you have the same code goes to production. There's nothing new there. Also middlewares have access to sensitive information. Could be security flaw. Bhai. Or just we. This also has access to sensitive information. Is that a security flaw? If no, then how does it matter if you're middleware? It's all code on your backend server. Middleware isn't running somewhere else on the client or jahan pe bhai there is sensitive information, bad things would happen. No, 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 no. Just this is all backend code, including anything you write in your user validator, kidney validator or here. So they will have access to security information, and that is fine. You own this code. You have written this code. Don't write code that is insensitive, and then it will be fine. Is next called by default when we don't call it ourselves? No. You have to call it, else it will be stuck there. If I don't call next in a callback, control will be stuck here. It will not neither move to the route handler and nor basically it will just be stuck. The end user will not see any response coming back. It will eventually time out the request. I don't have a database of Gmail and some particular college, but I'm building a project on how can I know whether an email is valid or not, whether it's an actual present email. Oh, for that you have to send out an email. So when the request comes here, you use a service like SendGrid to send them an email. They get an OTP, they put an OTP, put OTP validation logic. We'll cover this eventually. Can we write depending schema on in Zod? Depending schema, for example, can I ask age? Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I answered that. You figure it out. Probably not. Probably not. I don't think there's an easy way to do that. Can we pass data from middleware to another middleware? Yeah, the way you do that is, we'll cover this tomorrow, but at high level, it's a very ugly way to do it, but this is how you do it. Regress. Next, you do something like this. And then here you can access. Just add it. You just shove more things to this request object. In case of global catch, why did we define next in middleware? It has nothing else to do with pass. Yeah, it has. I can have multiple error handlers, and this can pass it to this one. How can a rate limiter works if the app is deployed on two or more servers? Then it's a whole different beast. If you have a distributed app, then you have to have a distributed rate limiter, which sometimes you do it at an API gateway level, which means, in front of all your servers, there's another server which does rate limiting, or you do it at the load balancer level. Yeah, this won't work if you have multiple servers in a distributed fashion. Explain app-reduce middleware and global catch. You should go back to the video and go through it again. And then if you still don't understand it, I will cover it in an offline video. Real-time middleware usage. Real life middleware usage, you're saying. Maybe. I don't know. This is sort of like a middleware. Insurance check, there is other room. Doctor cabin mein, you're not doing insurance checks and blood tests and BP checks. Doctor is like, I'm a busy man. This is my logic. Don't come here. Don't pollute my logic. Any extra logic, checks that need to happen outside. If you think valid, then come. It's very, sunky doctor. Have you seen sunky doctors who have glasses like these and very old and cranky? Those people are like, I'm the master of this room. So only if this is done, you come to me. These are all chota people sitting here. So they delegate all the tasks out here. This is what middlewares do. Upfront checks before your actual logic runs. Will there be mini project on backend to understand how things work together? Yeah, we'll do Paytm, enough backend, more backend than you need. And then in the 1-200 part, we'll do Zerodha. That's more backend than you will ever need. Recap of Zod. So recap at a high level it's a library that lets you do Given a blueprint, lets you validate whether or not an input follows that blueprint. It's a high level. Go back to the video after the class and then go through it one, two more, three more times. 96, 95% understood. I think you should eventually. Some Python question I'm going to ignore. Someone posted a big code base, questions with which might be better to explore examples in hospital beyond hospitals. Okay, sounds good. Do we use Zod for body payload or only for headers? Everything we use for body, use it for headers, anything you want to validate. Explain Postman process. Oh, there's a video last week offline. You should go through it. Is middleware a synchronous or asynchronous function? Depends on you. You are writing it. If your middleware, does just this, then it's fine. If your middleware has a set timeout, and inside the set timeout is when you call next after, let's say, 1 second, then middleware is asynchronous, else it is synchronous. Why should login password be sent as a header and not as a body parameter? Great question. So login password can be sent as a body parameter. The token should not be body. Why? Because it needs to be sent in a get request also, which means someone hits the browser, also the cookie should go out. And how will they specify कि हाँ body में put my cookie? So high level, that's the reason. Just standard practice कि हाँ any authentication information goes there. Can we make middleware core asynchronous? Yeah, I just did here. You can see. If my application has more than one JavaScript page, do I need a global error handling needs JS? No, this is backend logic. This is not frontend logic. And you need a single, this thing irrespective of, how many routes you have, how many files you have them in. Please sum up auth again. We'll do it tomorrow. Talk about it. Don't worry about it. Are you using random status number in codes 411 now? So 411, I think, means something input is invalid, something like that, which is why I used it. It could be pretty random. I haven't googled it in a while. But at a high level, I just chose one from the 400 series. PSO for login can be. I don't understand this question, Ishan. Sorry. When are you getting Harnoor's standard course? I have it. I just have to go through the effort of uploading 100 videos, which will be, I want to say a weekend thing, but definitely not a weekend thing. So we'll see. I have the course, but I can't just put it like this, right? I have to upload it on the platform. Why global catch written at the end? देखो यार, where you're writing middlewares matters. If I write an app produce here, in all routes after it, it will be used. If I add it here, it will not be used in the routes before it. So the general funda is कि हाँ, first you have all your initial middlewares, then you have your routes, then you have your global catches, because that's the order they run in. First your initial middlewares need to run, then your route needs to run, then in case there was an exception, the last thing needs to run. So that is why this needs to be at the end. If you push it to the top and there is an exception here, that exception will not reach above. It will only reach the middlewares below. Where do we send headers, as we have not sent any in Postman? Not send it in any time in real world app. Well, we did, right? A while back, I was in Postman. I went here. I sent username and password from here. And I think, do you mean where? How do we send it from the backend? We'll get to it. We don't have to worry about it. Fast recap, very fast recap. 2-second recap is we have learned three things: middlewares, global catches, and Zod. Can we pass output? Okay, answer that. What is the scenario when request handler should also have a next? Great question. It is usually to describe an error. If you think there's an error in an application, you can either do this. If something bad happened, you can do throw new error and something like this, or you can call next error found. And I think this will just call this. Could be wrong here. I think that's the use of next in the route handler. Google it. ChatGPT will tell you. Most probably it is this. What are the uses of middleware other than checkups? Mostly this only. Authentication checks, other validation checks. That's it. Or extracting body parameters, things like these. How did we use Zod in the middleware? You can just call it. If this is your middleware. Do a schema.parse. Safe parse here. It'll just work. If there's an error, return it early. Do res.json, res.send break out of the function? If not, why not? They don't break out of the function. Please explain more about control flow here. Okay, sure. So that's the thing, right? They don't. Res.send JSON. This, what does it do? It says, bhaiya, jo bhi request aayi thi, whatever request came, return this to them. Cool. put something else here, it will still work. A function can't break the flow of JavaScript unless you explicitly put a return statement before your other logic. If you, as the developer, write some bad logic and do something after this and then do another rest.send or whatever, that's bad logic you've written. Rest.json won't early return, even though it ideally should. I totally agree. After you have returned something, why do you need to do something after it? I agree. But a function can't just break control flow. If there are statements after this, JavaScript will have to execute them. You have to be smart to not write anything after it. How do we add more conditional in the same statement? Oh, well, if A equal to 1 and B equal to 2 and so on and so forth, keep doing. You said blood test fail hua hai, rest.send and nikal jao bahar, correct? But you also said lines will be executed after rest.send. Well, blood test hua hai middleware. Inside the middleware, I do if something rest.send else next, right? So this rest.send does not call next. So the control will never reach here. This is the bahar nikal ja. This is the early stop. I feel like there's an issue in your input. Stop right here. Else do a next. If I put this next here, then you're sending back also, and the controller is reaching, and this will send again, and that will be a problem. Is calculate request function a recursive function? Calculate request, where is that function? Where does the control go when next executes in calculate request? It is not a recursive function. I think you meant this one, request count or something like that. I think you mean this one. And if I do app.use calculate request, then on every request, control will reach, a request count will go up, next will get called, control will reach that specific request, whatever was called. So it's just control reaching that a middleware and going to the body and so on and so forth. So yeah. Okay, I'll upload the recording as soon as possible. When will we start real world projects? Yeah, real world project को तो बहुत time है. At least a month, if not. How can you send costume error using Zod? You mean custom error using Zod? तो वही ना, you get back const response equal to whatever, schema dot save parse, and then you pass in the data, and then response dot errors contains all your errors. You can just return that to the front end. App dot use. Explain karo, sir. Sure. Console dot log hi. Just this much code. Try to run. Use calculate request. There you go. You will see anytime a request comes here, before it reaches here, it goes here. How? Because I said app.use this. I said whole app, please use this middleware. Please first this function will get called. And whenever this function calls next, will your actual route get called? So what does this do? This says that whatever function you have called in, passed in, will first get called. And if this function calls next, is when the actual route will get called. Cool. All right. How are we doing after all of these doubts? %90. It's not bad. So अब जो 10% बचे हैं, only questions for you. Out of space on my machine, but that's fine. Any more questions from today's class? No high level questions or anything else, but any questions from today's class? 50 questions. Can you pop your video out, which is very annoying? Can't pop, or you cannot pop my webcam video out. I know there's an easy way to fix this, but I will. Rookie, remind me of this. Where do we send headers, as we not cannot send Postman every time in real world app? Oh, in real world app, you can send headers always. Whenever you're doing a fetch call, or however you're sending the request, there is a section where you can put headers and pass whatever you. We'll do this tomorrow. Sir, can you please post all the codes for today's class somewhere? Eesh. I will try. I did not have a good track of them. I'm sure Rookie does on Discord. He posts all the resources somewhere. I hope he will post all the codes there. The ones that I at least wrote, like justified, sorry. Route level middleware. Where's the question there though? How do you find input validation? How to do file input validation? Like, is the file of a particular type? Best database video store images include normal text according to you. So file validation के लिए तो भैया CSV is a certain format. Zord is not for that. Zord is for simple human backend applications. For this, you will need something else only. Most probably you'll have to write some custom logic, or there'll be some library out there that will let you do it. Best database to store videos and images. You don't store videos and images in a database. You store them in object stores like S3. Explain ChatGPT API call again. Sort. Oh, it's basically any time I'm in ChatGPT, I'm putting some message here, pressing enter. There's a request that goes out. I can actually. Oh wow, could not parse your authentication token. Please try again. Did someone do something with my auth token? Maybe not. Let's try that one more time. Yeah, seems to work. So here I said, this is my request. It sends some payload. It sends some headers. And one header here is called authorization, which contains my token. If I show you this whole thing, you can basically hijack my ChatGPT account. Why the order of middleware function impacts request response cycle? Well, because if I define, app.use 1, then 2, then 3, then the way that they get called is first this gets called, then this gets called, then this gets called, then your out gets called. So that's why the order matters. My throat is beginning to hurt a bit, तो मैं थोड़ा आराम से बोलूँगा. Can there be multiple global catches in the server? Yes. Can you give some example of error handling middlewares in which there is different from global catch? Unsure of that. I'm sure there's, yeah, I think that's just global catches. Or if you want to do, route specific, you will put it inside a try catch block, and if there's an exception, it'll reach your catch block, and you'll do whatever you want here. Hope that makes sense. Is Zord used for backend or also can be used for front? It can be used for front end or additional. I'm unsure. I mean, probably you can probably use Zord on front end. Front end. Unsure. Haven't really seen anyone use it. You probably can. You're doing anything in validate input function. How is the response getting stored in the route callback? In validate input function, what is this? Where is the validate input function? You're not returning anything here. How is the response getting stored in the route callback? If I was not returning it, that syntax was incorrect. If there is a function, oh, I wasn't. Correct. I should have though. So that's just my fault. I should return response here. Whatever. If I do const, get the idea. Response equal to schema safe parse. I need to return it, and only then can whoever is calling it can use it. How are tokens stored in local storage are safe? Well, it's my browser, right? This is my browser. As long as someone else does not get access to my browser, they are safe. The problem comes when I am off my machine and my friend comes here and quickly opens my network tab and goes to local storage and pulls out my tokens. And if they do, then they're just lucky. How else will you do it? Like, you'll have to store it somewhere on the local machine only, right? IntelliSense give me suggestion that Zord number, not number. What is it? I have no idea. Could you? I mean, totally missed your question. Can you ask it here? Can you use middleware for some specific routes? Yeah, you can, right? As I said, just pass it here, and then this will just be used for this route. If you do an app.use, it will be used for all the routes. Authorization and authentication are the same. No, they're very different. High level authentication, I think, is the process of username, password validation, make sure you have access. Authorization is key. Even if you have access, you might have access to some things not have access to other things. That is what authorization means. I think interview question है, इसको Google कर लेना. When using HTTPS, the headers are also encrypted. Yes, everything is encrypted, including headers and everything else. It's basically end-to-end encrypted. Basically means I send everything from my machine. Beachmate is completely encrypted. When it reaches the server, it gets decrypted, and headers, body, everything gets decrypted. Sleep.js completed from sleep completed.js from assignments. What about it? Global help user is their server error. How will developer know what caused the internal server error? Well, yes, that's the thing, right? You log the in this global cache that you might have at the end, you log it on a server, and then you look at the stack trace, and then you figure it out. Or I mean, there's something called, forgetting the name, APM, application platform monitoring, where you literally track everything, including the inputs. So you can reach the stack trace, reach the input, figure out what the user was doing, things like these. Separate video to use Postman. I did one. Tell me if that's not enough, but maybe I didn't do enough in that. I just gave a high level. Sure, I can do a dedicated video on Postman. Let me write that down. Where do you send headers as we not? I mean, you can send headers in Postman. You can send headers other places as well, like in the browser. Postman video. Alrighty. 10 teams are working on an e-commerce project where if one team works on React, Node, it's off-topic question, Python question. How can we judge ourselves? Okay, off-topic question. But yeah, I understand logic, what app.use and app.get. All working with I understand logic, but how app.use? So go through the video again first, and then I'll create an offline video for this as well. React videos from cohort one. Let me think about that. How can you upload DevOps related videos? Previous cohort. We did not have too much DevOps in the last cohort. Where did you send headers, as we cannot send it in Postman every time in the real world application? Hitesh, I don't understand your question very well. Can you, using random status code? Oh, 411 I think has a significance. The status code. Please quick recap of Zord. भाई अब खत्म हो गया हूँ यार मैं. I'll do it in an offline video. When I'm hitting a server with a put or a delete request, given an ID as a query parameter, I'm not getting cannot put this thing. You might not have a put handler on your server, sir, or a delete handler on your server. That is why the default thing that Express gives you if a route does not exist is that error that you're saying, Yanas Sheikh. So most probably the problem is you don't have an actual handler. Can we use middleware for authentication and then we give him access to the main data feed? Can we use middleware? Then we give access to the main data feed. Yeah, middleware is used for authentication. We'll cover it tomorrow. Why so trusted today? Also wonderful class. Thank you. And no reason. For authentication, can we use variable front end after login to keep track? Unsure. I understand. I don't understand the question, Ishan. All right, guys. Have to call it here. आँखें मेरी फट गई हैं. Happy if you have more questions, TAs are there. And I will cover middlewares at least, and maybe global caches in an offline video. I will cover Postman in an offline video. I've written this down. Thank you for joining. TAs are there after the class, and tomorrow's class we'll do something that's slightly disjoint from this. So even if you don't understand a few bits for this, tomorrow you'll be fine. But make sure you have a MongoDB database ready by tomorrow, so you can understand what's happening tomorrow. Cool. Let's call it here. Thank you all for joining. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.